Hi everybody and welcome to A Case of the Jills. Before we get started today, I am going to talk about a couple of different businesses and charities that I think are worthy of supporting. I want to make it clear that I am not sponsored by any of these groups. They're just businesses or products or services or charities that I think are worthwhile and I want to share with you. If this is not something that you're interested in, go ahead and fast forward a couple minutes and I'll see you on the other side. For those of you who are still here, I want to tell you about a company, an author, and a charity that I'm really loving this week. The first company is called Ashi Beauty. This is an indigenous and Black-owned beauty company. They make cosmetics and skincare products that are cruelty-free, hypoallergenic, non-comedogenic, and paraben-free. You can check them out on Instagram. I will leave the handle here. If you are looking for a really incredible summer read, I invite you to check out Kwana Jackson. She wrote this really great book called Real Men Knit. It is the perfect summer read. It is fun, it is funny, it is sexy. You can find a link to her book below, and also you can find her handle here. The charity that I am supporting this month and I invite you to check out is the Marsha P. Johnson Institute. This is a nonprofit organization in action for human rights for Black transgender folks. You can find their handle right here. Okay, so let's get started with the video today. We're going to be talking about gender stereotypes in the topic of RED-S, which is Relative Energy Deficiency in sport. I want to make a disclaimer at the beginning of this video. This video discusses gender differences along the binary of male and female. I do not love this and I do not find it inclusive. The current science and research is done on the gender binary. So there is male research and there is female research. I'm just giving you what we have. But I acknowledge that our transgender friends may experience a combination of these stereotypes. There's psychological, physiological, and of course environmental factors. All of that is going to influence their experience of these stereotypes. And unfortunately, they're going to be stereotyped on top of the stereotypes. And while I cannot change that, at the end of the day, the purpose of this video is to show you that no matter what your gender is, the stereotypes are absolutely terrible. My motivation for doing this video is basically because I got annoyed. It's not new that there's so much stereotype associated with this, but I just have a really low tolerance for this crap right now and I thought I would share it with you. This is really about education and recognition. I'm gonna try my hard not to whine as much as possible, although it's gonna be hard. I wanna help you see what I see as I'm researching this stuff for my thesis, so that you don't get stuck into the same ideas and thinking that certain things pertain to you depending on your gender. So without further ado, we're going to talk about 5 ways that the research on RED-S is gender stereotyped. This is just scratching the surface, but this is just the 5 that I could squeeze into one video. The first way that we see these gender stereotypes is just with the general language being used. If we start looking at the literature and we start breaking it down between the stuff that's directed toward female athletes and the stuff that's directed toward male athletes, we notice that there is a big difference in the way that this is talked about. With women, almost every single article that talks about underfueling or RED-S starts with the idea of the female athlete triad. Just the name alone of this kind of gives us the idea that this is a female-centric issue. Even when the article veers away from using the female athlete triad terminology and starts to talk about RED-S, the language being used is, well, you'll see. With women, we're talking about thinness. Always. There's said to be a focus on aesthetics, perfectionism, approval seeking. Most of these studies go back to talk about eating disorder. They'll use terms like this is common among young women. Okay, let's not even talk about the fact that how ageist that is, but that's another video. Body image is often cited as an underlying reason for underfueling. In contrast, the literature that's directed around the male experience of RED-S uses a very different term. We call it LEA, low energy availability. It's a very technical term, you see. The term impaired nutrition is used. And discussions of why someone would do this are not related to body image, but making weight. Some of these articles even reference things like food insecurity and financial instability as reasons why male athletes may underfuel. This is basically offloading the responsibility to the environment and not in particular to the psyche of the athlete. And of course, the term that we see most often when it's associated with male athletes and why they would choose to underfuel and potentially overtrain, the word of the day is performance. The second way that we know that this literature has a gender stereotype is with regard to the target. Almost every article that describes RED-S has a female in the leading photograph. Many articles start off as though they're going to have a balanced discussion of energy deficiency, but they all start off talking about the female athlete triad. Even though they start saying about how that is an insufficient way to describe what's going on, they linger there. They launch into a discussion that rehashes the same old stereotyped ideas about why it's women, young women, and women who are insecure and looking to be thin to achieve a certain aesthetic. One of the problems with these articles is that they focus on a lack of menstruation as an indication that there is potential underfueling. They point to this as the thing for people to understand that there is something happening. But this leaves men without concrete proof of what to look for. They don't have the canary in the coal mine of hypothalamic amenorrhea to realize that they're doing something wrong. So if the article is only targeted on females, you miss the boat for the men. These articles squander the opportunity to help men see the signs and symptoms of Red S. Third way that we see these gender stereotypes is that discussions of male athletes are much more likely to use the term unintentional. In fact, it is usually assumed that female athletes are restricting on purpose. Aesthetics and perfectionism are always mentioned. This really crawls up my can in such a way for two reasons. This further shames men into thinking that they can't possibly have a problem with Red S because only girls do that stuff. And secondly, my own personal experience does not fall along this gender stereotype. There is no question that I had a lot of screwed up intentions around food and eating as an athlete, but it is true that there was an unintentional aspect to this for me personally. I thought that as a celiac, I knew how to fuel my body. I did not. I thought that I could get by on basically a low or lower carbohydrate diet and be fine. I got romanced with that whole concept of being fat adapted. I'm not saying there weren't disordered eating patterns there. What I'm saying is that it's much more complex than these articles would have you think. And by the way, with regard to intention, some male athletes are as body obsessed as some female athletes. This is not shameful, this is reality. And if we don't pay attention to that, it just prolongs people getting help. Number 4, the severity and seriousness of the treatment protocol is also subject to gender stereotypes. Red S in male athletes is treated more seriously in a way that is almost laughable. One reputable website cites a 2006 study by Baum, and I have to read to you what it says. It says, where males are concerned, the involvement of a psychiatrist is particularly important due to an increased incidence of comorbid depression and substance abuse. Just men, huh? Just men need that? I have a question. Is it because they are more subject to mental illness? Or is it because our toxic culture makes it more difficult for men to admit that they have a condition most normally associated with females? This same article invites psychiatrists who are treating male athletes to be empathetic toward the athletic psyche, understanding that continued involvement in sport may be highly important to the athlete's self-esteem. Just men, huh? Female athletes want to be skinny, but male athletes have an athletic psyche. I couldn't make this up if I tried. You know what though? This is just as disrespectful to men as it is to women. It continues the gender stereotypes and makes it harder for anyone to speak up on either side because shame is all wrapped into it. And the 5th way that we can see gender stereotypes in the discussion of Red S is the discussion of where the actual pressure comes from. In the literature, you are more likely to find descriptions of women having pre-existing psychological conditions before they get into their sport. What they say in the literature is that women get into certain sports because of the tendency for weight to have to be controlled in those particular sports. In contrast, men are described as trying to achieve a particular body weight in order to achieve a certain level of performance in the sport. So it's not that there's something wrong with them, it's that they're doing it for their performance again. In the newest literature, what is emerging is even more troubling. With recent articles, we're starting to understand that female athletes getting nutrition advice, particularly from male coaches, might not be getting the proper advice for them with regard to fueling. But this is not at all the case for male athletes, particularly in weight-sensitive sports like running, cycling, and wrestling. Oh my God, jockeys, people, I can't even, you don't want me to go there. There is usually coach support and even training for male athletes in these sports that require them to hit a certain weight. I just remember all the wrestlers in my high school spitting into cups and I was going, what are you guys doing? Ugh. Unfortunately, a lot of that behavior hasn't changed. When you have coach support, you're less likely to feel like something is wrong, again, prolonging your diagnosis and access to care. Irrespective of all this, a 2008 study by James Glazer points out that Red S in male athletes is on the rise. And I have to wonder, is it that Red S for male athletes is on the rise, or is it that our recognition and acceptance of the fact that this is something that can happen to male athletes is on the rise? The fact that it's on the rise is corroborated by a 2018 study by Ferrand on male cyclists. 50% of the elite male cyclists in this study were positive for eating disorder. And I've actually referenced this before, but a 2002 study on triathletes, male and female, found that 23% of the male athletes in the study were engaged in disordered eating behaviors. And by the way, 100% of the participants in this study, male or female, found that they were unhappy with their current BMI. These studies do nothing but prove that men are untreated, undiagnosed, and unrecognized. The majority of the studies erroneously suggest that these types of eating issues in male athletes are seasonal, and that most return to normal eating behaviors when the sport is finished. I have at least 4 ex-boyfriends that will prove that's wrong. So let's get to some facts. Male athletes are at a high risk for Red S. It's not just elite athletes, it's also high-performing recreational athletes. The sport doesn't necessarily matter. The mindset does. Pressures and motivations may be different between the genders, or they may be the same, but just hard to admit. We have to leave space for both to be true. Relegating Red S to a girl thing doesn't help anyone get the help and support they need. All of this prolongs recognition of the problem, particularly in men. By the time they show up in a doctor's office, they are in an advanced state of psychological and physical decline. Better awareness is needed, absolutely, but better detection methods are needed as well. In a 2018 study in the British Medical Journal on elite male cyclists, they found that the gold standard for a diagnosis of Red S in male athletes was to look at the Z-score in the lumbar spine. The Z-score, remember, is a measure of bone mineral density. So basically what we're saying is, these guys have to get to a point where their bone mineral density is compromised in order for us to recognize that there's a nutrition problem. That's just not good enough. If we have to get that far, we're just not doing enough for our athletes. Guys, I could really lose my mind talking about this topic today, and there are so many different ways to open up this discussion. I am really excited to hear from you on this topic, male or female. Please talk to me about how you have experienced this among your peers of athletes or even in yourself. I would love for you to either comment below or contact me via email. You can email me at acaseofthejills@gmail.com. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe. Remember, if you'd like to schedule a mentoring call with me, you can do so at acaseofthejills.com. The link to do so is below. You can also follow me on Instagram at acaseofthejills. I hope that you are safe and healthy wherever you are. Wear a mask, wash your hands. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.